me and Hindu firmly believe that if we could bring a little bit more of the touch of the divine in our daily lives, it would make life so much more easier to lead. And getting inspired from stories of these masters who have walked the paths helps us kind of pick up even one timeless truth and apply it in our daily lives in this moment, right this minute. And I come from the holistic education, social empowerment, and mental health background. And this topic is extremely relevant to me because I really feel like a lot of problems would disappear if we took some time to go within. In Hindi, when we say "मैं भीतर गया, मैं भी तर गया," that means that if I go within, I also get across this ocean of worldly existence. And I think like that's probably one of the main reasons me and Hindol are doing this podcast. Gauri Ma, the first disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, the first woman disciple as well of Sri Ramakrishna, a great moment in India's spiritual and monastic traditions when Sri Ramakrishna gave Gauri Ma her monastic robes. Hindol, I believe she also set up the first Nari Matha in 1895, and she was also a mystic who would dress up as a man often. So there's so much to unpack about her. I'm super inspired to start this today with you.
So many things touch us every day, and we often wonder how they have touched our very innermost core. And we are trying to understand what really goes on in this experience. I'm Hindol Sen Gupta. I'm a historian by profession. This is the Sacred Podcast. We are looking for a touch of the sacred in our lives with my dear old friend Neha Bhatnagar. And it's been an incredible journey of talking about, to begin with, all these wonderful lesser known saints. You may have some of our earlier episodes on absolutely incredible characters like Muktabai, the great tribal worshipper of Shiva, Kanappa, and many others. And today we're going to talk about somebody very close to me. I have an old connection over many generations with Ramakrishna Mission, and so does Neha. We're going to talk about the incredible Gauri Ma. One of the great contributions of Gauri Ma was that she really developed this Saradaswari, named after the spiritual consort of the wife of Sri Ramakrishna, Sharda Devi. So she started the Saradaswari Ashrams, and an entire movement of monastic order of women. The Ramakrishna Mission has men, and this entire Sharda mission, Sharda Ashrams, Saradeswari Ashrams tradition, including women from every part of life who seek a deeper truth, higher truth, allowing them to come and become monasts, take up the monastic life, and developing from the very beginning a certain gender equality, a gender celebration at the very heart of the Ramakrishna Mission movement.
She was born Mridani in 1857 in an influential Brahmin household, very pious. Again, the ground was laid from past lives, as the Sri Ramakrishnas would say that she has been a gopi in many births and Krishna has blessed her. And so she's one of those rare, perfect souls that was born in a very pious household. Her mother had even published 2 books on Nam Japa, and her father was a pious Brahmin who was not afraid of wearing his religious markings on himself, even though he worked for the British. And the mother had a dream, Giribala Devi had a dream that, the goddess was handing over this beautiful child to her. And since she was a child, she displayed tremendous interest towards spiritual traditions. Where when she was approached to get married at the age of 13, she said, I will only marry that bridegroom who is immortal. And what she meant by that was Lord Krishna. And we see in her from childhood this yearning for God, for the saints of God. So she was even very fond of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and she escapes her house at the age of 18. The family had gone for a trip to Ganga Sagar, and there she disguised herself as a sadhvi and escaped from the big party of people who had gone, her family members, and goes off Hindol into the Himalayas. In those days, as a woman, through the darkness, the wilderness of the Himalayas, which was quite an unusual thing to do. They would be in groups, but to go alone and meditate and do intense, austere practices from sunset to sunrise, kind of japa, fasting, silence, going from dham to dham, the char dhams and Kashmir and you name it, Hindol. I mean, what a journey.
Incredible, incredible story. You know, she was perhaps most beloved of Sri Ramakrishna after his own spiritual consort, his wife Sharda Devi. It is important to remember that none of this affection, this was all in the spiritual realm. People sometimes misunderstand this kind of affection, but actually, this was all in the spiritual realm. And indeed, Swami Vivekananda looked upon Gauri Ma in a sense as another mother, as of course he did to Sharda Devi. And Swami Vivekananda famously said that Gaurima was the ultimate devotee of Krishna. She was like a gopi come alive, devoted to Sri Krishna. And when the first Saradeswari ashrams were being created, Swami Vivekananda created these ashrams, realizing that and helped her create these ashrams and asked her to lead this movement because she realized that the comfort, solace, and the home that many women, the spiritual home that many women were seeking in our country, could only come from a true spiritual master like Gaurima.
And Swami Vivekananda in 1896 had written a letter to her after the ashram had opened saying that there is no chance for the welfare of the world unless the condition of the women is not improved. It is not possible for a bird to fly on a single wing. In Ramakrishna mission, he said that, there is this acceptance of woman as the guru, and there's a preaching of the motherhood of women as representations of the divine mother or Sharada Devi. And Gauri Ma was who he said that thousands of such Gaurimas are needed for the upliftment of, as you said, Hindu, the deplorable conditions that women were going through at that time, where there was so much superstition, there was no voice they had, there was no rights to property, there was no proper education, there was no possibility of seeking God as well. Like they were just silenced, and it was also very repressed colonial times as well, right? So for the Indian woman, there was a lot of trouble that she had to go through in the household. So he said that, in seeing your ashram, it would be great to have Gargis, Maitreys, Arundhatis coming out from here, like the great saints from the past, the intellectual Sanatanis who were in the Indian tradition. And she had also said that one day I'll take you to America. I want to show the women there, what kind of women are born in India. So you're right, Hindol. He was very he was very supportive of her. He took a lot of pride in her work and that what she had started. And much like him, her brand of teaching was very fiery. So it wasn't this sort of weak sort of spirituality. It was this walking alone like a rhinoceros, as you would say, like fearing nothing, not trembling at voices or noises. And she kind of instilled that fearlessness in the women that she nurtured and mentored.
One of the most interesting things that I find, you remember, this is all the sort of Renaissance period in Bengal's history, and of course, all these incredible women are coming out of places like the Brahmo Samaj and others at the very elite top of society. But there's a lot of trouble, of course, as you were saying, that women are facing at the lower rungs of society, so to speak. And there, one of the big problems is that a lot of widowed women face a lot of ostracism, not just in Bengal but around the country. And women who choose monastic paths also sometimes are looked at, in a particular way because society cannot understand their choices. And often widowed women and women who choose monastic paths are made to live a particular kind of austere life. They only have to eat certain kinds of food and live in a particular way, only dress in a particular way, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of Bengali literature of that time written about this. And what I find very interesting is that Sharda Devi herself, the spiritual consort, the wife of Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, really the great master of Dakshineswar, who was the master of Swami Vivikananda also. So Sharda Devi actually told Gauri Ma that the women who come to her, they are free to wear the clothes. They don't always have to wear monastic ochre or orange or saffron robes. They can dress like married women and or women in the world, so to speak. And in order for them to dress like married women, Gaurima used to go, make them go through a little ritual or a practice where they would be married to Lord Jagannath, right? And then because they were all, married to Narayan himself, so to speak, to Vishnu, to Lord Jagannath, uh, they could therefore, quite like the gopis, quite like all the great lovers of Sri Krishna, they were able to wear whatever they wanted to wear and dress like married women in whatever colored clothing that they wanted to wear. I find that there is so many layers of things happening in this wonderful story. There is rebellion against societal pressure. There is rejection of patriarchy. There is a certain sense of huge freedom assisted by spirituality. There's so much happening there that I really find this story quite amazing and incredible.
Yeah, I did not know about this ritual, Hindu. Thanks for telling us about this, because that actually makes a lot of sense. Because I think there was a time where Sharada Devi was wanting to break the bangles, that because when Ramakrishna took samadhi, because he was no longer in his body, and he appears and says that don't have to break these bangles. Ask Gauri; she knows the scriptures. And so when Sharada Devi a year later goes to Vrindavan where Gauri Ma was, she asked her that he told me to not do that. And she said, yes, because he is the eternal master and you're therefore his consort Lakshmi. So you're married. He's everywhere, not in his body, but he is very much present. And that would be inauspicious if you break your bangle. So she was very rooted in the scriptures of India, which made her then stand from that deep grounding as an activist, but not as an activist as we often picture, where it's a lot of like anger or vitriol towards society, but gently explaining to people based on that grounding. So, there's one story where at night there were noises coming from the neighboring house from near the ashram. And everyone told her, no, no, don't go there. It could be dangerous to go to strangers at night. But she was always for the right action, so for the Dharmic path. So she went there and she saw that they were troubling the daughter in law. And she explained to them that this is Lakshmi. She is Lakshmi. Someone's daughter is your Lakshmi. You have to treat her as that. And then she would repeatedly go to check on them to see if they were doing okay. Or if someone wanted to discard the cow who's not giving milk anymore, she would tell them, would you discard your old mother just because she's not working anymore? You know, so she would really take care of these old cows. If someone was drowning in the water, there's a story that goes, she would just jump in even though she didn't know how to save, because that was the right thing to do, because our scriptures teach us that you see the one in the many and the many in the one. And every person is a manifestation of the divine. So she would come from this very deep grounding from all of the years of study. So before she met Ramakrishna, there was 15 years where she traversed the length of northern India, Eastern India, as a monastic, getting visions of seeing. She even saw little baby Krishna. She even used to wear the Damodar Shila Hindu. And as you know, that's a very tough stone to worship because you have to have a lot of rituals around it. But because this nun from Vrindavan had given it to her as a child and told her, the stone wants to be with you, who is a representation of the divine, she would take care of it, yeah, as the divine, a lot of rituals associated with it, and traversing the length and breadth. And then when she met Ramakrishna at the age of 25, spent 3 years with him, again perfecting her sadhana, the devotion to God. And this made for a perfect sort of social worker that she was later, because she came from this deep well of sadhana for so many years.
Very little is known about her. Of course, a lot is known about Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, and of course Sharda Devi, but very little is commonly known about Gauri Ma. But as you said, Gauri Ma was probably one of the most important disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. In a sense, as far as deep devotion and really an absolute surrender to the divine is concerned, she's probably as important in a sense as Swami Vivekananda. Of course, Swami Vivekananda is revolutionary because he took the message of his master, Sri Ramakrishna, across the world to America, to England, and other parts of the world, and was pioneering in spirit in that sense. And of course, Swami Vivekananda is in many ways the father of India's nationalist movement. But Gaurima, I think, is really in the tradition. I was talking about this Renaissance period, a period of great, intellectual ferment in Bengal, and a lot of new ideas coming out from that time. We usually laud many incredible women from that period, women who became doctors or women who were very learned, who wrote books or, studied very deep philosophies, perhaps could sing beautifully. All women who stepped up into the world and, took their rightful position. And we really cherish and treasure these women because, they opened the doors for countless others. But perhaps because Gaurima took a different path, she took a path of sannyas, she took a path of renunciation, she took a path of, in a sense, giving up all material pleasures. We don't put her in the same pedestal, but I would argue that we should because she actually did one better. She was a true institution builder. In the Saradeswari Ashram principle, she had built a whole bunch of principles in that ashram which would enable women to really find their rightful position. And one of those key principles was education, because women had been kept away from education for a long, long time at that point in time. And therefore, even though it was monastic life, even though it was sannyas, the first binding and most important principle of the ashram created by Gaurima was to spread the light of education among women, even though these women had in a sense renounced material world, but education was still absolutely critical. I find that really fascinating. Also, her incredible work for the uplift of widows, often who would not get the right kind of position and all were often, ostracized or, made to lead a life of extreme austerity, really to benefit them, to teach them, a new world, to discover themselves. Many of these women would become widows at a very early age, to really help them build a life, also to teach them the real, true, fundamental values of Hinduism, not just, topped up with a lot of rituals, but the real fundamental enlightening values. So, a lot of extremely progressive principles in this movement, in this institution building work that Gaurima did.
Yes, and Ramakrishna had known that without education based on like spiritual foundations, the advancement of women was going to be a challenge for this country. And if the women were not going to advance, then there was no way that India would advance. So, in a way, he sowed the seeds in Gaurima, which were to take sprout many, many years later. So he did tell her that, when she was with him for those 3 years, that enough tapasya, now is the time to take up this work and it will happen in this city. But the itinerant wanderer that she was, she's like, no, Swami, give me some girls, I'll take them to the Himalayas and make them lead a monastic life and really transform their character. He said, no, it has to be in this city and your work has to be here. And she had wanted to go away even then. She went back to Vrindavan. Meanwhile, Sri Ramakrishna took Samadhi. After that, also, she went south. So she went to a lot of the southern temples and she carried the water from Gangotri to Rameshwar in the south and worshipped and practiced for a long time in Vrindavan. But one day, it sprouted. The seeds which she had sowed sprouted for this work that she was to carry on. And then she, like you said, full surrender. She knew that the master had said it, even Sharada Ma had said when she had visited, in Vrindavan after Ramakrishna had left the body, that he wanted you to do. He said that your purpose is this in this lifetime, to work for the welfare of women. And then she just knew that, that's what she had to do. So till now, she had seen them countless across the travels across the country from a detached perspective. And now there was this completely different perspective. Her motherly heart rose with compassion, at the lack of not only physical strength, but mental, emotional, spiritual strength of these women in our country, the lack of spiritual education as well as formal education. So the school that she started was interesting because there was a dinacharya which involved Sanskrit scriptures, learning Sanskrit, learning English, doing chores as well of the household, but also formal education, some staying at the ashram, a lot more coming from outside. But Hindol, this is what really, really fascinates me. And like you said, it's unfortunate that not many of us know about her. As you know, I come from the social service space. I run a women's organization myself. And what I have noticed time and again is when we do things which get accolades and name and fame in society, there tends to come this sort of little bit of like if I could say ego, but also this sort of recognition that I'm doing something good for society. I'm probably a good person. What I loved and I learned from her and I wish to apply in my life on a day-to-day basis, especially when it comes to my NGO work, is she was so brutal when it came to name and fame. She would say, name and fame are like the excreta of pigs. They're like garbage. If when you're serving others, if even a vestige of pride comes in your heart, then that is equivalent to suicide for spiritual growth. One day someone had one of the extension of the buildings of the ashram had Sharda Devi's name, but it had a small name of Gauri Ma written under it. She got out in anger and she said, "What is mine? Is this ashram mine? Or is it, Ramakrishna and Sharada Devi's?" And then they're like, "But it's a small letter." She's like, "No, it's not." And then she walked off and then they had to change it. And principled to such a level with surrender, because in such a line, I've seen it's not rosy all the time. Someday there's support, someday there's not support. And you tend to question this path you're taking. She would never question. So she would not criticize anyone. She would not look back. She would say, God has willed it, it will happen. She would do every task, small and big. So there was nothing like, oh, I'm the founder or I'm the CEO. If the task was to sweep that day, she would sweep. If it was to beg house to house because there were no alms, she would beg. Everything was God's work. Everything was Ramakrishna's work. She didn't distinguish between small, big, low, high, or any sort of position. And the best, this was something that I was amazed by. When there were times when there was no food in the ashram, she has gone begging from morning to night, home to home, not telling who she is. She would just say, I run something for these women and there's no food. Someone would give, you know, she would come back. And if anyone had any question, even on the task that she was set out to do, and they asked about God or the Gita or anything, she would just get lost in explaining these concepts, to them, and then forget that she had to do that, but then come back to it as well. So switch from bhakti to karma in an instant, as if it was completely normal. In fact, one day when housewife saw her, and of course, you can't hide sunlight, right? So she saw her and she gave her the dal, the sabzis for the cooking. But she said there's something about it. So she sent her young little boy to run this errand and said, go follow her. She saw this principal of the Sanskrit college, even touch her feet on the path and take her in his carriage to the ashram. And the boy followed and saw who she really was. And this housewife, was quite embarrassed. She came later and became a good supporter of the ashram. But the story is to say that she didn't go and tell that, that she was realized in any which way. All she would do is go as a simple bhikshuni, and say, in the name of God, to give me whatever you have, if it's possible today. And one day someone said, here is 50,000 rupees, I'll give it to you. But because she had that divine vision also, and she knew, she was on a different plane, she said, no, this money is not clean. And they later found out that it's true that that money was actually by cheating his widowed sister-in-law She told that man, keep it back, give it to her, that will be a service to the ashram and it will be a service to yourself as well. So even in straightened means, she held on to the values and principles and had such divine faith that it really, for anyone in the field of social work, it's an amazing thing. Not only social work, but education as well. And of course, for anyone in work, she would always say, approach every task that you do as not mine but thine. Let thy will be done kind of a thing. She didn't say those exact words, but that was the bhav that she approached it with.
It's an incredible story. It's an incredible story in a historic sort of way because, of course, everybody knows, or many people know, the story and the history of Sri Ramakrishna and, of course, Swami Vivekananda, but very little of Gauri Ma. They, of course, know of this grand movement that was started by Swami Vivekananda, the Ramakrishna Mission, but less about the Saradeswari Ashrams and, the entire women's part of the Ramakrishna Mission's work and the incredible leader that Gauri Ma was. I also think, her story has such great lessons today for us where, even championing a gender, right? I mean, today we are far more aware of gender equity, gender balance, and rightfully so. It's very important. But I sometimes feel that all the examples we hold up as achievement, even among women, are all material achievers. And that's very important. Extremely important. I'm not saying that's not important. Business leaders, leaders in sport, leaders in business, all of that is extremely important. In education, politics, all of that is extremely important. But I feel somehow, we don't hold up enough of the women's spiritual leaders, right? I mean, there are few, but we could do much, much more in that dimension. And when we talk about gender equity, gender parity, ensuring that women have a voice today, we don't do enough in bringing the spiritual aspect of that to the forefront.
That is such a good point because what we see in her is this perfection of the spiritual work. So almost like the first two limbs of yoga, if someone sets out in the path of learning asanas, we often forget that yama and niyama come before that. And that is character building, the basic steps of yama and niyama. Because if you're going to meditate or if you're going to try to, let's say, do any work in this world actually, the character is everything. If that's not there, then the pitfalls, the shadripu, as they say in yoga, comes into us. All of those fears and greed and disgust or jealousy and all of these other things that happen to us, that we humans experience on a day-to-day basis. So she would often teach that, purity of mind, utmost important. Sri Ramakrishna would say, if you have a pure mind, a pure body, anything is possible. The grace of God, if a human life is not experienced in this birth, then it's a very a birth full of struggles. So we have to pray sincerely. I remember once when she was in her early years doing intense practices of Nam Japa, the name of God in Vrindavan, one little boy in the temple had asked her, why do you do so much, japa? Isn't it enough to just wake up in the morning and say Radhe Sham? And she said, yes, that would be ideal with all your heart and mind if you can say Radhe Sham once. But to reach that stage, it's very important to practice all of those austerities. She would ask Ramakrishna, I've wandered for so many years, and here you were right here in Calcutta. 15 years I roamed, doing practices. He said, but would you have done all of that sadhana? If you had found me earlier. So your spiritual practices have given you that grounding, he told her. Now is the time to convert that into work to uplift the women. So that core of educate yourself, yes, but have a strong spiritual base as well, so that that education enables you to do more self-sacrifice for others, so that that education does not raise ahamkara or ego in us, so that that education is not corrupt and can actually serve the nation. And that's what, women saints like her who were also reformers, teach us. She had even met the enlightened women saints of her time when she had gone to Pune right before she started the ashram. She had met Iravati Karve in Pune, even Ramabai Ranade, who had actually started the first Indian-run women's school. So they had spoken at length about the plight of women. She had met Lokmanya Tilak. So it's not like she was only worshipping or doing sadhana. She would also meet these masters. Sharat Chandra Bose was a regular donor and would come. So many people would come to listen to her satsangs and also talk about social reforms. Gandhiji had also met her and been very inspired by her knowledge of unattachment and the Bhagavad Gita. A judge had once asked her, how do I see God? Is it really possible? And she had said, of course it is. Like when you send a letter out, don't you put the postage on it? Only when you put the postage does it reach the destination. Same way, with all your love, if you chant, it will reach, your plea will reach, and you'll see him face to face. So there was no discrepancy between talks of God and work, and very real practical work, including financial accounts and uh, interviews of the future employees and creating this Matri Sangha of, sannyasins who were like very spiritually sound to be able to make this work long term and sustainable. There was no discrepancy.
Incredible, incredible story. Today, when we talk about leadership, apart from all the other amazing women in the material world that we hold up, it is perhaps important also to find real energy and inspiration from the stories of these lesser known saints of India, Gauri Ma being one of the most important ones among these saints.
In closing, Hindol, I'd just like to mention what she said on AIR, All India Radio, on the 100th anniversary of Ramakrishna's Samadhi. And she said that we as humans forget the duty of life due to tamas, an involvement in petty affairs of Maya or this illusion of life. And we forget God. Sri Ramakrishna was born to awaken God consciousness, the eternal truth in all of us. And it's possible for all of us to achieve that consciousness in this very lifetime.
That really is this journey, also, in a very small way, of this podcast to get that little touch of the secret, to trigger that little, flowering, as it were, of the secret, to really bring that little joy of the secret in every single life, quite like we try to find it in our lives. Thank you very much for being with us. Namaste.
Namaste.